Okay, welcome back, everyone. We've got something really interesting you sent over for us to explore today. It's an entry, April 29th, from the Rhapsody of Realities devotional by Pastor Chris. And our goal here for this deep dive is to really unpack its core message. It seems to be about how we approach faith, challenges, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, this reading really it focuses hard on actively trusting God to the point of, well, the text uses the phrase proving him in your life. And it argues for quite a significant shift, actually, moving away from, say, desperation towards a more confident faith.
Right, confidence. And it uses a few different ways to build that argument, doesn't it? There are theological points, of course, but also a personal story, quite a striking one, and biblical references too.
Exactly. It weaves them together.
So why should we start? Maybe with that point about prayer, the one that sort of jumped out at me about not needing to beg.
Yes, let's start there. It makes a pretty bold claim that as believers, as children of God, you really shouldn't be in situations where begging, even in prayer, feels like the only way forward.
Okay, and the reasoning behind that.
The reasoning given is tied to identity. It says believers are heirs, heirs of the monarch of the universe. That's the phrase used. And because of that status, they possess inherent honor, dignity, glorification. So begging doesn't quite fit that picture.
That's a challenging idea. I mean, if you think about it, many people do feel desperate sometimes. How might taking that specific perspective that begging doesn't align with your identity as an heir, how might that actually change someone's approach, when facing real difficulties or just in their everyday prayer life?
Well, it fundamentally reframes the relationship, doesn't it? It suggests you're not approaching God as like a powerless outsider hoping for a favor, but more like a child who understands they have a certain standing and inheritance. So it shifts from perhaps pleading from lack to asserting or claiming what you believe is already yours through that relationship, through faith.
Okay, I see the distinction. It's a shift in stance. And then the devotional talks about focus, right? Where we put our attention when things get tough.
Yes, exactly. It points out a potential danger in getting sort of fixated on how big the problems seem. Instead, it urges redirecting that focus entirely onto God.
And this is where that phrase, prove God, comes in, referencing Malachi.
That's it. Malachi 3.10, prove me now herewith. The devotional interprets this quite directly, not like you're testing God's limits, but almost like you're challenging him in a way, showing you believe he can handle whatever it is, that he isn't intimidated by the scale of your need or your request.
So it's about shifting perspective from the problem dominating your view to God being the bigger reality.
Precisely. God is presented as the one capable of stepping into any circumstance, no matter how overwhelming it looks from, ground level.
And to make this point more concrete, less abstract, the reading includes that story, the anecdote about the woman.
Ah, yes, the healing anecdote. A woman with a serious blood condition, something that, according to the text, medicine hadn't been able to sort out.
Right. Tell us how that story unfolds in the devotional.
Well, it describes the woman explaining her situation to Pastor Chris, emphasizing how overwhelming it felt. And his response wasn't, say, a lengthy prayer of pleading, but rather an immediate declaration, a declaration of healing in the name of Jesus Christ.
Just like that.
Just like that, according to the account. And the crucial part, the follow-up, is that subsequent medical tests apparently showed no trace of the illness anymore.
Wow. Okay, so that's obviously a very powerful story within this context. What's the intended message there? What function does it serve in the overall argument?
It serves as, well, intended evidence, a practical illustration. It's meant to show the power of faith in action, the possibility of divine intervention that overrides seemingly impossible medical situations. It bolsters that core idea.
Yeah.
Actively trust God, focus on him, not the problem, and expect results. It aims to build the reader's confidence.
Okay. And then it moves from this specific example back to a more general theological justification for this kind of confidence.
Yes, it grounds it in God's nature. Specifically, God's willingness and even, the text suggests, enthusiasm for the believer's success and well-being.
How does it make that case?
It uses that analogy from Matthew 7.11. You know, the one where Jesus talks about earthly fathers? Even flawed human parents want to give good gifts to their children. So the argument is, if that's true for humans, how much more true must it be for a perfect, loving God?
Right, so God isn't reluctant. He's portrayed as wanting to bless, wanting to give good things.
Exactly. It directly counters any idea that you need to somehow persuade or beg a hesitant God. Instead, it encourages exercising faith and trust, precisely because God is presented as inherently loving and abundantly capable.
So, thinking about that, understanding God not as someone you have to convince, but as this loving father figure already eager to provide, how could that realistically change how someone prays or even just faces challenges day to day? Does it lessen anxiety, maybe? Encourage more boldness?
I think that's exactly the question the devotional wants the reader to grapple with, because that perspective leads directly into the main takeaway, the ultimate goal presented.
Which is,
Living in superabundance. That's the term used. It's not just about scraping by or managing problems. It's about experiencing an overflow. And the superabundance is presented as the natural result of, well, trusting God fully, doing your part, naturally, but then having this unwavering expectation that God will absolutely do his part.
and it keeps coming back to that call to action to beat him.
Yes, that's the thread running through it.
Yeah.
Prove him in your life, in your finances, in your health, whatever the area might be.
Yeah.
It's not advocating a passive, sit back and wait kind of faith. It's active, engaging with the belief, testing the promises, expecting to see them manifest.
Okay, so let's recap our deep dive into this Rhapsody of Realities entry. We looked at the call to move beyond begging and prayer based on identity as an heir. We talked about shifting focus from the size of problems onto God himself. We considered that powerful healing anecdote as an illustration of faith in action.
Right. And the theological underpinning God as a loving father, eager to bless, based on Matthew 7:11, all leading to this central idea of living in superabundance through active trust and proving God's promises.
It's a very specific framework for faith in action.
Definitely. And maybe a final thought for listeners to mull over building on this. Where in your own life right now might you be focusing more on the problem than on, let's say, actively trusting for a solution or outcome based on what you believe? Is there one small practical step you could take, even today, to consciously shift that focus, to start proving him in the way this text suggests?
That's a great question to leave people with, a very tangible way to think about applying these ideas. And if you want to find out more about the source material, Rhapsody of Realities, the website mentioned is www.rhapsodyofrealities.org. Thank you so much for sending this in and for joining us on this deep dive today.
For more information on how you can grow spiritually using Rhapsody of Realities, please visit our website, www.rhapsodyofrealities.org, or you can also visit rin.rhapsodyofrealities.org/salvation. Thank you.